I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart, down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart today. Joy, joy down in my heart. Ah, how about you? Lisa, or if we want to be more accurate, Lisa the Painful, is a game set in a perverted post apocalyptic world filled only by men. It's a game that tells you it's going to be a life ruining experience right there on the store page. It's a game that knows it'll make you laugh when you think you should be uncomfortable. And when it wants you to be uncomfortable, it drives it into your skull. This isn't a story where you're some kick-ass gunslinging ranger trekking through the desert on a quest for revenge from a shallow grave. This is a story about trauma turning men into monsters, about how you can't atone for every sin, about how no matter how fast or far you run, your past will still find a way to catch up to you and blame you for what you've become. You won't be forgiven for some actions, no matter how much you beg. The damage you've caused can't be taken back, and you need to live with that. You're forced to make decisions on the fly that will affect you or the people that are around you. Do you sacrifice your arm or let someone else die? Do you heal your group by resting by a fire, or you risk getting jumped? Or what happened to me, someone leaves you while you're asleep. Well, fuck you too, Olin. But are these actions you'll allow to haunt you, or will you be able to move on with your life and towards your only real goal in mind? Now, I know I've mentioned time and time again, be it in my streams or even in my previous videos, about how RPG Maker games just have a style that draws you into them and have somehow a memorable experience despite the limitations. They draw you in through their world and their characters, and some really good writing can take you a long way. But that becomes tricky when it comes to sensitive subjects like the ones we're about to witness. This isn't a world people deserve to be in, but it's a place they need to survive in. Our player character throughout Lisa the Painful isn't someone who is a good person. We're not rooting for them because they're doing something right or because they have a justful soul or like a kind aura or whatever have you. It's someone we're rooting for in a sense because we want to see them succeed, despite all odds and despite their own trauma and their own sick actions. He stands out from the rest. His goal isn't survival, it's redemption. You play as Brad, a recovering joy addict, who finds the only girl left alone in the world, Buddy, your now adoptive daughter. The only living girl that has the potential to save the world in the sickest of ways. I'd say Adam and Eve style, but the reality of such a thing is just a lot less. Yeah, it's the apocalypse. There's no other signs of female life. People want to survive. But Brad refuses to give her up to a safer place, however. Mentioned being Rando's army, where they have the means of protecting her and keeping her safe. But instead he raises her with his friends, while doing his best to hide her from the entirety of the world. He doesn't see her as a chance to save the world, he sees her as a second chance for himself. An opportunity to redeem himself for his inability to save his sister, Lisa. To be a better dad than his was to either of them. Brad's sister, Lisa, was essentially kept inside of their home and abused in every way under the sun by their father, Marty, and Brad just couldn't let Buddy into the hands of anybody else. They just use her like his father. Or even worse, just see her as a way to satisfy their urges. But in a bit of a sick way, because of his selfishness and his want for redemption, he's kind of become an image of his father. He's kept Buddy hidden away in her home and refuses to let her leave. He, like, Brad's relapsed into his alcoholism and his drug addictions through joy, being like a souped up painkiller almost, something that makes you feel nothing. And Buddy witnesses him in these inebriated states. She even tried to leave her home during one of his little benders, and it led to her being caught by Brad and being ushered back inside, of course. And Brad nearly goes back into his drug-filled stupor, but he instead throws away his pills to try and curb the addiction. I think he kind of realized he's doing the exact same thing. But without the aid of joy, his hallucinations become too much. He goes and collects the very same pills he threw away and just goes on to another bender where he won't be seen. But when he wakes up, he hears barking and yelling for help, and someone's stuck in a tree because of a dog. And Lord, did Brad show that dog who's boss. And even though he didn't really want it, that person who he saved, quote unquote, ends up following him through the kindness that was displayed for him. Welcome to the party, Terry. And when Brad heads home, however, his house is streaked in blood with his friend Cheeks dying by the entrance. Buddy's gone, but it clearly wasn't without a fight. Brad knows what he's got to do, and he heads out to find Buddy. She's his second chance, after all. Terry is super insistent on helping Brad find whatever he's looking for, and Brad does do his best to shake him off, but Terry just absolutely refuses. he realizes that Brad can't do this alone, and despite Brad saying it's something he has to do alone, he tags along anyways. There could be more dogs out there in the wild after all. Brad needs a strong, tough man to help keep him safe, and that strong, tough man is Terry Hintz. Yeah, thanks, Terry. And our journey begins. As Brad treks through this land of death and explicit magazines, you as a player are forced to make some choices that we'd never want to have forced upon us. There's some obvious answers, like helping someone to gain another party member, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing you're doing. Like, I found a golden chicken and held it ransom so its owner would work with me. And I got a fine bottle of whiskey and enabled a absolute drunk to get him on my team. I mean, to be fair, I used him until the end of the game, so, like, worth it. I found a man tied up within the bathhouse, and I could have taken him back to his friend, or, friend. It's some gay rights, but I could also just sell him to a local shop for a quick 150 mangs. It's a tough choice. It's hard. Our first actual choice, though, Brad and Terry get ambushed by one of Brad's old bullies. Brad is given a choice to let them take Terry or to hand over all his items. I honestly chose to keep Terry since he was my only ever party member. The funny thing here is, though, your choices do have consequences. If you had let them take Terry, Terry would have come back as an enemy later on, as Terrible Terry. And he actually has an instant kill move that does not knock your party members out unless it's hit by Brad, but it absolutely kills them. And if your party member dies, there is no getting them back. It's permadeath. So, realistically, I took the easy way out, honestly. Much of the interactions in the game tend to be more on the comical side, playing up the insanity and the confusing nature of the apocalypse. But I'll try not to get too distracted by the haha funnies and talk more about some of the bigger points I had throughout my playthrough of the game. So don't be fooled. There's still some sickos out there who aren't afraid to spill their fantasies onto you in broad daylight. I mean, consistent daylight. The sun never sets here. But the humor itself isn't bad either. It's honestly really well paced, and it never completely comes out of its element. It's weird, but it works. I mean, one of the first things you can do in the game coming out of the main area is meet a fellow who is running an orphanage for a bunch of kids. And one of the kids starts playing with a match and it comes up lit. So he's like, "Oh no, you can't be playing with fire. Hey fella, would you hand me that bucket over there?" And of course you hand him the bucket, but it ends up being a fucking bucket of gasoline. And all of a sudden all the kids are on fire and he's like, "Not that bucket, you dolt, the other bucket." And it's just like way up on a cliff face and it's completely out of the way. It's like, I would have never even seen that in the first place. What do you mean? But of course, by the time you come back down, they're all deceased and it's just a pile of ash and he's like, "Oh, this is terrible." And you just keep on going on. You just keep on going. And as we keep on going and as we explore, we end up running into a man named Buzzo, and he starts off his little introduction with the same song I sang at the beginning of the video. He's a reoccurring asshole with a good purpose, to hurt Brad. The first way he does it is just by giving him some joy and telling him he'll be watching. And Brad eventually does stumble upon one of his original friends too, Rick, but something's wrong. He runs when Brad approaches and even socks him to try and keep him at bay, all while a projection of Lisa watches on, looming far above Brad. And Lisa herself, despite being a ghost of his past, is still a reoccurring character in herself. She's not a reason or like a byproduct of his trauma, but she was shared within his traumas and is a constant reminder of what he's failed to do. Brad does eventually catch up to Rick and tackles him, ties him to a pole for interrogation, but Rick just tells him to stay out of it, that Buddy isn't his girl, that she doesn't belong to him, that's gone on for way too long, it's gone on long enough. Rick says straight to his face that he's not fit to raise a kid, that she's the only way to save the world, and what does Brad expect anyways, for them just to die off without her? And Brad doesn't have an answer. He just, again, asks where she is. He continues to push the fact that she's his girl, just showing further that he can't see the bigger picture, or he doesn't want to, because he knows how they'll use her because of his pent-up guilt, how Lisa was used, how he couldn't stop it. Rick tells him he can't be selfish anymore. Brad's not a father, he's an addict. I haven't used any joy in my playthrough, and Brad tells him that, but Rick doesn't buy it. He doesn't buy that he stopped. Rick refuses to talk, and because talk isn't going to work, Brad picks up a spiked bat, and he beats the information out of Rick. It takes a few strikes, but Rick ends up telling Brad that she's in a cave with Sticky. Brad goes way too far, though, cutting his sentence off and swinging again and again and again and again and again until they both pass out. Rick's face is mauled. We're told he's done for upon inspection, and Brad just pushes forward up until he's ambushed by a double eye patch wearing man. Okay, look. Lisa the Painful honestly does many things right, and one of those is jumping from humor into a serious moment, like the shock value of the, "Oh god, what just happened?" to the, "haha, that's funny." Like, we just beat our friend to death, damn it, and bam, a thug who's blinded himself with 2 eye patches shows up. The best thing is that he jumps right past Brad, and he's just kind of flailing his knife around without any sense of aim or direction. So you could keep on walking, but I put him out of his knife waving misery. The poor guy wasn't gonna mug anyone like that. So we get the break for humor, and we go right back into trouble. Buzzo appears again, and we only get that brief respite before he forces a choice on the Brad. He has to choose whether or not to chop off his own arm or to lose a party member. There's no good progress in Lisa. There's certainly a sense of progress, but it'll be a lasting reminder of what you've lost. I'd say it's an illusion of choice, but really it's more of a case of picking the lesser of two evils. Is it better for you to keep this team member and a friend, or would you rather retain your strength so you can defend yourself at full power? I had him cut off Brad's arm. But then we have another shock from the serious to the humor as we're given a motorcycle by a dying man, and Brad rides off to find Buddy again. We spend the entire time running over people and doing some sick little jumps until we run into a man named Rando. He's the very leader of the army that could have protected Buddy the best, like our friends had said in the start of the game. And he has one of his lackeys apologize on his behalf, and he gives Brad some rations. And after Rando leaves, his other gang members try to beat the rations back out of Brad's group. They weren't successful, but even here we start to get a hint into Rando's character too. You see this big, imposing, red skull-faced man, but the way he's displayed here, he whispers to his subordinate. He has him speak on his behalf, and when he passes, there's a little mention of like a notice that he's been crying. Rando is a very sensitive fellow, and it's a nice little breath in this world of absolute fucking psychopaths. But still, Brad pushes on. Eventually, he's actually kidnapped and forced into a game of Russian roulette, which I hope I don't have to explain the rules of. I mean, the game is pretty infamous. On my first try, though, I lost more people than I was comfortable with, so on a second go, I only lost one. Brad never worked with him anyways, so what's one body in a ditch? I got 50 megs for it. But the funny thing with the Russian roulette game is that it's a make or break for a lot of people's runs if they're refusing to save scum, because of the fact that while like after this initial spot you can come back to it and you can get more megs and you even get a party member if you get to the last round, but the thing is that it's completely up to chance. Some people say that your luck stat has something to do with it, but no, it is completely, absolutely random, and I think that's kind of impressive in a sense. That's something that's so rewarding can be so debilitating if you don't have the luck of the draw, right? It's a little interesting. As we push along, we find the cave that Buddy has been told to stay within by her two living uncles and Brad's friends, Sticky and Rick. Rick, who had been previously, But when we find Buddy, she asks about Sticky, she asks about Rick, and we know what happened to Rick, but Brad doesn't tell her that. Brad just says he doesn't know, that it doesn't matter. Instead, he demands that she follows him to get to a safer place, but Buddy doesn't want to listen. She refuses. She knows how important she is to the world, and maybe a part of her wants to help now. People need her. They care about her. And she knows about the joy that Brad takes. And even when Brad mentions that he's stopped, she reinforces the fact that she has a new life. That she's aware of the things that'll happen to her. Sticky showed her, she tells Brad. And Brad raises his voice. He demands clarification. And Buddy says that she's been told verbally, but Brad demands to be told what else he's done. She cowers and repeats that they just talked and begs Brad to stop. But he's afraid of Brad for a multitude of reasons, and this is just one of them. You're scaring me, she tells him. And he's just doing what he thinks is best, right? Is scaring Buddy into submission really the best she can be given, though? Brad eventually forces Buddy from the cave and right into an ambush from Buzzo's crew. Buddy is again separated from Brad, with Buzzo kept between them. Buzzo tells her all about the little blue pills Brad loves so much, and notes that he's even been offered them for a while. I've still gone through this whole playthrough without using them at all, to be fair. I mean, it's nice to see the little changes, like Brad telling Buddy he stopped doing it for her. For her. Not so he can break his own cycle of destruction. Buzzo does end up sharing some of his joy stash and tells Brad to eat up, but he doesn't budge. Not in front of her, he tells Buzzo. So he has his lucky hit Buddy, and that motivates Brad enough to take a pill under Buzzo's demand. And another. And another. 3 is what it takes for Brad to pass out and go through one of the worst highs of his life. The actual gameplay segment is short, but it features a long-necked Sticky berating Brad for not being able to teach her anything new, telling him that she asked for it, that she was thirsty for knowledge, and how could he be blamed? Brad wasn't going to teach her anything, someone had to educate her. He wouldn't have the guts to. This is a world where she's the only woman alive, after all. Or the only known woman alive. The only one who's physically capable of keeping the human race running. But this is also Brad's overdosed head. It can be very well truthful in a world where any man can be a sex pest waiting to strike. It sounds a little familiar. Okay, yeah, that one's a little on the nose, but the game portrays a sex-starved man-run humanity, and we've seen how people can act online and even worse in person. Brad has a very valid fear that Buddy will just be used for their entertainment and release, not unlike, well, Lisa when it came to their father. He wakes up and Buddy and the gang are gone. He pushes on. Alright, look. Brad isn't a father trying to do his best for his adoptive kid. Brad is a man hell-bent on keeping this kid for himself out of his own selfish redemption. It's kind of like The Last of Us conundrum where, Ellie is immune to the plague that's going around the world, but if they were to make a cure from her, it would end up killing her. So, do you sacrifice a girl in the hopes of saving a planet, or do you keep her by your side out of your own selfish desire to want to keep her safe? Okay, but here's the thing. Hi, it's Editing Alexi. Okay, so I've only ever watched my dad play a little bit of The Last of Us, and thinking about this and watching some videos on it because, the TV show came out. The cordyceps mushroom, it's a fungus. It's not a virus. I don't know why I said virus. It's a fungus. So it's a fungal infection. It affects the brain. It's not supposed to infect humans. But here's the thing. What if something about humans had lowered their immune system? COVID-19. What if the fungus was forced to adapt to its climate? Climate change. Therefore, The Last of Us is a post-COVID-19 series. Genius. And anyways, yeah, it's a fungus. It affects the brain. When it comes to Ellie, there's no guarantee that there would be a cure, and it's the exact same idea here. There's no guarantee that she'd actually be able to help repopulate the Earth. It's a chance that they're taking, and is it worth that chance that you're taking? That's the whole idea of it. And this is where we kind of end up rooting for Brad a little bit still, is the same why we start to root for Joel in some cases, because when it comes to it, we don't want this kid to go through an ill fate. It's in the case of Buddy, it may not be explicit death, but it could be something very, very close to it. But it comes back to the fact that Brad's a man hell-bent on keeping the kid for himself. And this is repeated by a beat-up Sticky when we catch up to him. Sticky even reinforces how messed up they both were, coming from broken homes, and there was just one big difference between them. While they both got addicted to painkillers and different drugs, maybe, Sticky kept his chin up. Brad was the one to fall, and he fell hard. Sticky even tells Brad that Buddy isn't his kid. He reinforces that fact, just the same as Rick thought. She's a gift to the world, not just to him. Brad's not man enough to do what needs to be done, and it's kind of true. She was just found in the middle of nowhere by his home. He's the one who took it as a second chance. He's the one who took it personally. It makes you wonder what would have happened if Brad wasn't watching Buddy like a hawk. And frankly, I don't like any of the ideas that come to mind. But before Brad can kill Sticky, Rick arrives to defend him. He begs Brad not to kill them, which, in my playthrough, I didn't. I told them to screw off and never show their faces again. Very shortly after, we meet with Buzzo again, and he's got Buddy dangling by her poncho in front of us, and Brad's severed arm on top of the spike on his head. Oh my! I honestly didn't notice that until I went back into my footage. What a fucking messed up dude! I love it. I love it so much. It just fits that apocalyptic wasteland feel so well, while also playing to him focusing on hurting Brad. He's taunting him, and even then, we're still given another hard choice to make. We can either keep all of our current party members, or physically mutilate Buddy by removing a piece of her chest. I honestly did hesitate here, but I took the route that'll guarantee that I'd still be able to hold up in a fight, and really, either option was going to traumatize her, and when Buddy is stabbed by Buzzo, she doesn't react. No screams, no cries, nothing. Buzzo enforces the fact he's not the one doing this. It's Brad. Buzzo throws her nipple at Brad, and it's a reminder of the choice he made. And a reminder of the choice we made. We can't discard it or sell it. There's no getting rid of it. The interesting thing with Buzzo here is, if you do make the choice to instead sacrifice your party, he straight up calls you sick, and he actually gives you a chance to rethink your option. But if you select to have your party killed still, he'll tell you that he doesn't think you could sink any lower, and he's reluctant in giving the order to kill Brad's party. And again, shortly after, Buddy's gone. She got away. Buzzo forces Brad into a second choice with his severed arm in front of him. Because no matter what he does to Brad, it will never be enough to make up for what Brad did to her. Or rather, what he couldn't do for her. For Lisa. His other arm or his possessions. I knew I couldn't survive without the goods, so I let him cut off Brad's remaining arm. It hurts, clearly. My attack and my defense lowered. My ability to perform combos, gone. I lost what kept Brad himself strong, but hey, I still have my party. Right? But you know what? Brad still pushed on. I still was keeping on. I had my synergies with my current party, and I had my items to keep me pushing through. And when I got some materials to a guy named Tardy so I could make a boat, he came back. Sticky. My choice to let him live had backfired very, very greatly on me. He proclaims that he can't let Brad destroy the world. What has to be done is done. Sticky's dressed head to toe in Rando's colors after all. He's joined those wanting to keep Buddy for themselves. He's a traitor in Brad's eyes. It doesn't pay to be a good person. Not in this world. Most of those who show kindness are taken advantage of or are just straight out killed. Sticky is doing what he thinks is right, but it's keeping us from Brad's daughter, quote unquote. We have already lost our items once to save Terry. We lost an arm to save one of our party members. We lost a part of Buddy saving people. We took pity and let Sticky live, but sadly for him, he still went down easy. I was honestly a little scared though, because this guy's got some badass multi-hit moves, and if you're not prepared, he's probably going to wipe the floor with you. We kill Sticky. We lose another one of Brad's friends, and Brad builds the boat with Tardy, letting the party sleep while they work. It's a small act of kindness for a silent project, but when they're finished, they're the ones that leave. Brad abandons his party to rescue Buddy on his own, and it again proves to bite us in the ass like everything else, since our little pilot here wanted to get his hands on Buddy too. Despite all of those willing to help us, they'd only hinder him. They'd just be like Tardy. The second that Brad turns his back, they'll pounce on her, surely. He couldn't let anyone else be around her. He couldn't let anybody touch his daughter. Brad finds her again, but she's sitting with his father, Marty. Same father that's abused him and Lisa to the point of her taking her own life. To the point of Brad starting his painkiller addiction, which evolved into joy. To the point where he became the very thing he hated the most. To the point that Buddy just couldn't agree with Brad's actions. Buddy is sitting with him, describing how those joy pills don't taste good, but they make you feel good. Marty actually tries to discourage her from taking any more, only for him to realize Brad's standing at the door, his son. We have the option to kill him, which I did, and it turned out to be a pathetic one-sided fight with Brad as the obvious stronger body. Buddy tries to intercept, but it doesn't stop Brad. It doesn't stop me. He just keeps attacking, despite it meaning Buddy gets hurt too. Everything he does for her so-called safety was just putting her into new risks, and here it's physical. When she steps in saying not to hurt him, it's Buddy that we're attacking, not Marty. And all she can do is cry and scratch at you. Brad has once again chosen a path that hurts Buddy, literally this time. And despite me having chosen to kill him, it's an inevitable fate. If you as the player choose to let him live, Brad still attacks. It's just, either way, it's under the influence of his joy addiction. With the screen flashing red and that image of strands of meat filling your vision, we saw it when Brad was beating down Rick too, that flash of red in the meat. It's his joy addiction taking over. It's that violent impulse. It's that desire for that very thing in the moment. In Rick's moment, it was that information out of Buddy, but then it turned into hurting his friend. In this moment with Marty, his only desire is to have him dead. While Brad is trying to atone for his sins of being unable to protect Lisa, this is the retribution for Marty's sins, his death. And that's all Brad thinks. That is all he can see, and it's all we can do. Brad knocks Buddy unconscious and kills Marty. After the battle, Marty even tries to tell Brad that he's changed. He even apologizes to Lisa before Brad takes his life. And all Brad can think of is that he had it coming. Just like after Rick's beat down, Brad passes out. And when he wakes up, Buddy's gone. She was the first to wake up and is taking the boat to escape, forcing Brad to use Tardy's dead body to push on after her. After the girl he just beat into submission. And again, we find her being held captive by a claw-wielding man, scratching at her face to ruin it, to mark her as his own, a permanent scar to destroy her perceived beauty, to make a lasting mark on history, even if he himself is never remembered. Even after saving her and offering his poncho, Buddy still won't accept Brad. Who knows what happened to Rick, but Sticky is dead because of him. He's kept her from the world, he's convinced her that everyone is out to use her, and has only raised her to defend herself. The struggle in their home, her escape from Buzzo, she was a monster, just like him. Just like how he saw Marty. In the few days that Marty took care of her, he was a better father than Brad was to her. All he wanted to do was to help her, but everything he's done has just hurt her. He's sacrificed parts of her body for others. He's sacrificed parts of himself to get to her. He's killed countless men trying to get to her, and while some of them have been perverted messes, some of them were just wanting to save the world. He's treated her just like he's been treated, hardening her in a world that wants to use her. Brad did do his best to keep her safe, but he didn't take her into consideration at all. He didn't care about her emotions. It was all so he could atone for Lisa's abuse and death. It was purely selfish, just like they've said. But it doesn't stop him. He's gone too far to stop. Buddy runs away from Brad again, leaving him to follow, but something's changed. He's no longer just a nobody, he's a failure. And our in-game class changes to reflect that, as well as our new lack of skills. We follow Buddy to a wall of Rando's gang members, and upon telling Buddy to run, she runs right behind them, away from Brad. The party that we've abandoned arrives and catches Brad off guard, but they're not here to help him. Some of them have come here because what he's doing is wrong. Some of them just want to be able to see a good future, and some of them are here for Buddy, just as he's worried. This was the very reason why he went to the island alone, because anyone else would just get in his way. They're traitors now, too. Brad refuses to let Buddy belong to anyone else and continues his bloody path to self-redemption. He kills the people he called his friends. It was out with the old, and now it's even out with the new. He tears through 4 waves of 6 men. They were all in the way. He approaches Rando, who tells Buddy to stay back. He doesn't want to fight Brad, but Brad knows that he's in the way. It's a much tougher fight, but Rando goes down just like everybody else, being left as nothing but a broken man. But Buddy's gone again. Brad crawls after her with arrows and cuts and blood sweeping from his body. The carnage of 25 men immediately behind him, 28 if you count his prior party members. But Buddy doesn't appreciate it. She doesn't understand why he's done it. She asks why he's only trying now. She tells him he's taking everything from her. The uncles that cared about her, the army that swore to protect her. Why is he trying to hurt her so much? Brad yells at her to stop, but she still asks why he's done this. She had a chance to do something for herself, and Brad still believes that, for good or bad, these men would have just used her. That Buddy would have her life chosen for her. She tells him not to preach to her. He's already chosen her life for her, keeping her inside, training her to protect her life, keeping her from the world and chasing her down to the ends of the earth, all because he didn't want to feel guilty about his sister anymore. Because he wanted to mean something to someone. He can't just be a father all of a sudden. He did want to do something good, and he tried. He thought he was trying. He honestly did try to kick Joy. He tried to keep her safe. But he wound up repeating the same actions as his father. He was well-intentioned, but he was a horrible parent. Brad asks her to do one thing for him. Just to hold him. Buddy's unsure, but he begs, and you're given the option. I chose to leave him alone. Brad's clearly and understandably upset, asking why, telling her that he loves her. But then he collapses, and the credits roll. And with that somber note, I want to thank my Patreons, including a special thanks to Comatose, Nomadic Raven, and Vivian Aldrin. And even in death, he can't help but to project the loss of his sister onto the only girl he knows in the world. Brad has been under the influence of joy for a long, long time. All these little red flashes, it could be considered the trauma flaring up, or it could be considered the joy aggravating his violent tendencies further. And I think that's a lot more sound from how, when it comes to Rick's beating, it flares up. When it comes to Marty, it flares up. And right before he starts attacking Rando's army, it flares up. The day that he decided to live is the day that he truly died. It's that day where he turned into a literal monster. Okay, look, even though Brad is a bad person and he repeats the poor habits of his father, his motivation is sound. He really does want to do good. He originally became a karate master to teach kids how to defend themselves, all because of the treatment of his father and the bullying that he was subjected to. He wants to save a kid, but it's fueled by selfishness. He's not mentally prepared to raise Buddy. They are both forced into a world of monsters and become a monster through their upbringing. Brad doesn't have the guts to break the cycle of abuse, letting his addictions and his violent tendencies get the better of him. He raised Buddy on violence, and on violence, she'll survive. While Lisa the Painful covers a multitude of different topics and a multitude of different themes, I take this game as a warning. It doesn't want you to feel good about beating down Rando. It's a depressing fight, and it's left with Buddy completely disowning Brad as any form of father figure. It's left with his journey being for nothing, becoming a joy mutant that threatens Buddy in the end, sacrificing everything just to be left with nothing. He wasn't able to break the cycle of abuse, and all it did was traumatize another little girl he couldn't protect. Brad is a protagonist that you don't want to become. Just don't ignore the signs. Don't be the one to throw someone's world into further chaos. Don't become Brad. Be more like Terry Hintz. That guy is the best man known to Aletha. Not a bad bone in his body. Terry Hintz for King of the Wasteland.